Let's start with George Washington, the first president of the United States of America, leading the nation from 1789 to 1797, the original commander-in-chief. Picture it, 1789, a nation barely stitched together, and all eyes on the man who just defeated the British Empire. Washington didn't want the presidency, but the presidency wanted him. No parties, no scandals, just an iron will. His first battle, defining what it even means to be Mr. President. He formed the first cabinet, crushed the Whiskey Rebellion without firing a shot, and laid down the rulebook with his farewell address. Warning about political factions and foreign entanglements, he stepped down after 2 terms, setting a precedent for peaceful power transitions, America's first real power move. Now it's John Adams' turn, serving from 1797 to 1801. A lawyer, a diplomat, a revolutionary. Adams was brilliant, but his presidency was a rough ride, elected after a brutal battle with Thomas Jefferson. No cheating, but the political mudslinging was vicious. His term was dominated by the quasi-war with France and the Alien and Sedition Acts, laws that jailed critics and haunted his legacy. His personal life, a loving marriage with Abigail Adams, whose letters are legendary. Adams left office bitter, losing to Jefferson, but history would eventually honor his foundational role. Thomas Jefferson takes the helm from 1801 to 1809, author of the Declaration of Independence, architect of the Louisiana Purchase. The man doubled America's size for $15 million, negotiating with Napoleon like a boss. He sent the Marines to battle Barbary pirates, America's first overseas war. But Jefferson's personal life is where the contradictions explode. A champion of liberty who owned hundreds of slaves. His relationship with Sally Hemings, an enslaved woman, is a painful chapter in his legacy. Yet his vision of an agrarian republic and minimal government still echoes through American politics. James Madison steps into the spotlight from 1809 to 1817, father of the Constitution, but as president, forced into the War of 1812. The British burned Washington, D.C., including the White House, while Madison fled. His wife, Dolly Madison, became a legend for saving George Washington's portrait from the flames. Madison's war was chaotic, but it ended in a stalemate, with America surviving. He expanded federal power, reluctantly, to fund the war effort. A cerebral leader in an era demanding brute force. James Monroe holds the presidency from 1817 to 1825. The Monroe Doctrine. Europe, stay out of the Americas. His era was dubbed the era of good feelings. But under the surface, slavery debates were heating up. The Missouri Compromise kept the peace, for now. Monroe's leadership was steady, his diplomacy sharp. His personal life, humble, simple, almost invisible. He believed in duty over fame. John Quincy Adams steps up from 1825 to 1829. The son of a president, but a man of his own. Fluent in 7 languages, he was a diplomat before he could legally drink. Elected after a corrupt bargain with Henry Clay, Adams entered office without public support. His presidency was stifled by political enemies. But post-presidency, he became a firebrand abolitionist in Congress, fighting slavery until his dying breath. He literally collapsed on the House floor fighting for what he believed in. And then came Andrew Jackson, taking office from 1829 to 1837. The first true populist president, a Battle of New Orleans hero. In 1824, he lost a rigged election. In 1828, he roared back and crushed his rivals. Jackson was a man of the people and an executioner of policies that led to the Trail of Tears. He fought the National Bank like it was a personal enemy, vetoed more bills than all his predecessors combined, and survived an assassination attempt where the gun misfired twice. Jackson pulled out a cane and beat the would-be assassin on the spot. Martin Van Buren took the wheel from 1837 to 1841, inheriting a booming economy and watching it crash. Known as the Little Magician, Van Buren was a master political strategist, but even he couldn't escape the panic of 1837. Banks collapsed, unemployment soared, and his laissez-faire response left Americans furious. The country blamed him for the Depression, coining the term Van Ruin. He fought to keep slavery from dividing the nation, but his cautious leadership didn't match the crisis. In 1840, he was swept aside by a populist war hero promising cider and log cabins. William Henry Harrison marched into office in 1841, but his presidency lasted just 31 days. The oldest president elected at the time, Harrison delivered the longest inaugural address in freezing rain without a coat. Pneumonia set in, and a month later, he was dead. His presidency remains the shortest in history, a cautionary tale about speeches, weather, and mortality. John Tyler stumbled into the presidency from 1841 to 1845, a man without a political home. Tyler was a Democrat turned Whig who clashed with his own party the moment he took office. His entire cabinet resigned, and Congress blocked most of his agenda, but Tyler played the long game. He pushed for the annexation of Texas, laying the groundwork for future conflict with Mexico. He was the first president to survive an impeachment attempt, though by just a few votes. Tyler's term was pure political guerrilla warfare, leaving him isolated but historically significant. James K. Polk seized the presidency from 1845 to 1849, a man with a checklist. And no time to waste. Polk promised to serve just one term, and in 4 years, he expanded America's territory by over a third. He orchestrated the annexation of Texas, secured Oregon, and provoked the Mexican-American War, which ended with America seizing California and the Southwest. Polk's aggressive expansionism fulfilled manifest destiny, but at the cost of igniting fierce debates over slavery's expansion. Exhausted and ill, he declined a second term and died 3 months after leaving office. Zachary Taylor took command from 1849 to 1850, a soldier thrown into a political minefield. A Mexican-American war hero with no political experience, Taylor was a straight-talking general who wanted to keep the Union together, but the slavery debate tore into his presidency. He opposed the extension of slavery into new territories, angering Southern leaders. Taylor's time was cut tragically short. He died suddenly after just 16 months in office under mysterious circumstances. His death would open the door for a cautious compromiser. Millard Fillmore filled the void from 1850 to 1853, a man trying to avoid the inevitable. Fillmore signed the Compromise of 1850, which temporarily eased North-South tensions. But the Fugitive Slave Act, part of the compromise, forced northern states to capture and return escaped slaves, enraging abolitionists and further polarizing the nation. Fillmore was a pragmatist, not a visionary. He failed to secure his party's nomination for a second term, becoming a forgotten figure, overshadowed by the storm gathering over America. Franklin Pierce stepped into office from 1853 to 1857, a president who lit a match in a room full of powder kegs. Pierce, young and charming, hoped to unite a divided nation, but his presidency did the opposite. The Kansas-Nebraska Act allowed new territories to decide on slavery by popular vote, leading to Bleeding Kansas, violent clashes that previewed the Civil War. Pierce's enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Act made him deeply unpopular in the North. By the end of his term, his party abandoned him, and the Union teetered closer to collapse. James Buchanan held the presidency from 1857 to 1861, standing still as the Union unraveled. A lifelong politician and former Secretary of State, Buchanan's belief in compromise turned into dangerous inaction. As Southern states seceded following Lincoln's election, Buchanan insisted it was illegal to stop them. His passive leadership during the Dred Scott decision, Bleeding Kansas, and secession crises made him one of history's most criticized presidents. He handed Lincoln a nation on the brink of civil war, his legacy forever tied to America's darkest hour. Abraham Lincoln takes center stage from 1861 to 1865. Civil War, a nation ripping itself apart. Lincoln's election triggered Southern secession. His first task, save the Union. The Emancipation Proclamation wasn't just a document. It turned the war into a moral crusade against slavery. His Gettysburg Address reframed American democracy in under 3 minutes, re-elected in 1864 as the war reached its bloody climax. But victory came at a brutal price. On April 14th, 1865, Lincoln was assassinated at Ford's Theater. He preserved the Union, ended slavery, and became a martyr. His legacy, eternal. Andrew Johnson found himself in the hot seat from 1865 to 1869. He never expected to be president, a Southern Democrat who stayed loyal to the Union. Johnson took over after Lincoln's assassination. His mission, rebuild a nation in ruins. But Johnson clashed with radical Republicans in Congress at every turn. He vetoed civil rights bills, tried to block Reconstruction efforts, and when Congress fought back, Johnson found himself impeached. The first in history, he survived removal by just one vote. His presidency, a war of attrition, his legacy, a missed chance at healing. Ulysses S. Grant, the Union's war hero, commanded the presidency from 1869 to 1877. The war hero America adored. Grant crushed the Confederacy. Now he had to lead a fractured nation. His presidency began with hope, fighting for civil rights, deploying federal troops to take down the KKK. But the battlefield simplicity gave way to the political swamp. His administration was riddled with scandals. Credit mobilier, whiskey ring, corruption circled him. But Grant himself, stoic, honest, the soldier at heart, lost in a politician's world. He left office, battered by scandal, but respected for his commitment to justice. Rutherford B. Hayes navigated the presidency from 1877 to 1881. The 1876 election, a mess. Hayes lost the popular vote, but a backroom deal, the Compromise of 1877, handed him the presidency. In exchange, federal troops were pulled from the South, ending Reconstruction. It stabilized the nation, but abandoned millions of newly freed African Americans to the mercy of Jim Crow laws. Hayes governed with integrity, but his legitimacy was questioned from day one. His presidency, a chess game of political survival. James A. Garfield's presidency was tragically brief in 1881. Brilliant, charismatic, a self-made man. Garfield's presidency started with promise. He fought the spoils system, aiming to reform the corrupt patronage network in Washington, but his crusade was cut short. On July 2nd, 1881, Charles Guiteau, a disgruntled office seeker, shot him at a train station. Garfield survived for 79 agonizing days before dying of infection. His assassination would ignite the push for civil service reform, Chester A. Arthur unexpectedly taking the reins from 1881 to 1885. A political insider, the product of the very patronage system Garfield died fighting. But once in office, Arthur flipped the script. He championed the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act, ending the spoils system that had defined his career. Known for his impeccable style, 5 custom-tailored suits rotated daily. Arthur surprised everyone by becoming a dignified, reform-minded president. His transformation, one of history's most unexpected glow-ups. Grover Cleveland bulldozed his way into the presidency from 1885 to 1889, a Democrat in a sea of Republicans. Known as the Bulldog of Vetoes, Cleveland stood firm against corruption and wasteful spending. He vetoed bill after bill, fighting special interests with a quiet but relentless resolve. His honesty was refreshing, but his personal life? Tabloid gold. Accused of fathering an illegitimate child, Cleveland faced the scandal head-on, famously telling the press, "Tell the truth." Despite his reformist agenda, the tide turned against him in 1888. He won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College to Benjamin Harrison. Cleveland walked away, but not for long. Benjamin Harrison stepped into the presidency from 1889 to 1893, carrying the legacy of his grandfather, William Henry Harrison. Tariffs, trusts, and expansionism dominated the headlines. He signed the Sherman Antitrust Act and the first federal law targeting monopolies, though enforcement would lag. His administration admitted 6 new states into the Union and modernized the Navy, but his support for high tariffs alienated voters, and he lost re-election to Grover Cleveland. Harrison's presidency marked the beginning of America's corporate wars. Grover Cleveland came back swinging from 1893 to 1897, the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. His second presidency was a political grind. The Panic of 1893 triggered a brutal economic depression. Banks failed, businesses collapsed, and unemployment soared. Cleveland's rigid commitment to the gold standard alienated many, while his harsh crackdown on the Pullman strike angered labor unions. He faced immense pressure to adopt more populist policies, but Cleveland remained a lone wolf, stubborn, incorruptible, and politically isolated. His second term was a constant battle against forces beyond his control. He left office battered but unbowed, a symbol of integrity in a world of compromise. William McKinley took office from 1897 to 1901, bringing stability after a turbulent decade. A calm, Calculated leader who preferred diplomacy over drama, but when the USS Maine exploded in Havana Harbor, the Spanish-American War became unavoidable. Under his leadership, America emerged victorious, gaining Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Marking its debut as a global power, his re-election in 1900 was a landslide, but his second term was cut short. In 1901, anarchist Leon Czolgosz shot him at the Pan American Exposition. McKinley's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was a transition into a new era of American boldness. Theodore Roosevelt charged into the White House from 1901 to 1909. Redefining presidential power, TR didn't walk into the presidency, but he stormed it. At 42, he became the youngest president ever, a Rough Rider, a trust buster, a conservationist. Roosevelt went after monopolies like a hunter in the wild. He built the Panama Canal, transformed America's Navy, and negotiated peace in the Russo-Japanese War, winning a Nobel Prize. His domestic policy, the Square Deal, fairness for workers, consumers, and businesses. Roosevelt didn't govern quietly. He redefined the presidency as a pulpit of action. "Speak softly and carry a big stick," he said, and he swung that stick fearlessly. William Howard Taft, Roosevelt's chosen successor, took the reins from 1909 to 1913. Taft never wanted the presidency. A brilliant jurist, he was more at home in a courtroom than the White House. Handpicked by Roosevelt, Taft found himself crushed by political expectations. His tenure saw major antitrust actions, more than Roosevelt himself, but his cautious demeanor frustrated progressives. His split with TR divided the Republican Party, handing the 1912 election to Woodrow Wilson. After his presidency, Taft achieved his true dream, becoming Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the only man to lead both the executive and judicial branches. Woodrow Wilson, the academic-turned-leader, guided America from 1913 to 1921, an academic, a reformer, a visionary, and a man of contradictions. Wilson's New Freedom agenda reformed banking, reduced tariffs, and strengthened antitrust laws. He kept America out of World War I, until German U-boats and the Zimmermann telegram left him no choice. The war to make the world safe for democracy redefined America's role on the global stage. Domestically, Wilson's segregationist policies darkened his progressive achievements. After the war, he championed the League of Nations but failed to bring America into it. A massive stroke sidelined him, while his wife Edith effectively ran the country in secret. Warren G. Harding entered the presidency from 1921 to 1923, promising a return to normalcy. Harding looked the part, tall, presidential, affable. But his administration became a synonym for corruption. The Teapot Dome scandal, and involving illegal leasing of federal oil reserves, was just the headline. Harding himself wasn't corrupt, but his cronies were. His sudden death in 1923 spared him from witnessing the full fallout. His presidency remains a cautionary tale of how charisma isn't enough. Calvin Coolidge quietly assumed the presidency from 1923 to 1929. Silent Cal. A man of few words, but sharp convictions. After Harding's death, Coolidge restored dignity to the office. He believed in small government and big business. The Roaring Twenties roared under his laissez-faire policies. He cut taxes, reduced national debt, and championed free markets. His personal life was marked by tragedy. The death of his teenage son during his presidency. Coolidge chose not to run for another term, quietly stepping aside as America danced on the edge of economic collapse. Herbert Hoover stepped into office from 1929 to 1933, hailed as a self-made humanitarian hero, an engineer, humanitarian, and self-made millionaire. Hoover organized massive relief efforts during World War I and was hailed as a global savior. But nothing could prepare him for the Great Depression. The stock market crashed just months into his presidency. His response? Too little, too late. He believed in volunteerism over direct government aid, which only deepened the crisis. Hoovervilles, shantytowns named after him, became symbols of public anger. By 1932, the country demanded change. Franklin D. Roosevelt took command from 1933 to 1945, steering a nation through its darkest storms. When FDR took office, America was on its knees. Banks collapsing, unemployment soaring, and the Great Depression suffocating the nation. His New Deal wasn't just a policy, it was an all-out assault on despair. Social Security, public works, and financial reforms revived hope. But the real test came on December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. Overnight, Roosevelt transformed from economic healer to wartime commander-in-chief. His fireside chats kept the nation calm. His strategy, a two-front war against Japan and Nazi Germany, demanded total mobilization. D-Day, island hopping, the Manhattan Project, all under his watch. Elected to an unprecedented 4 terms, FDR died in April 1945, just weeks before the war's end. His legacy, architect of modern America. Harry S. Truman stepped up from 1945 to 1953, facing decisions that would shape the atomic age. Thrust into power after FDR's death, Truman had to make the deadliest decision in human history. Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the atomic bombings that ended World War II but opened Pandora's box. Truman then faced the Cold War's birth. His Truman Doctrine pledged to contain communism. The Marshall Plan rebuilt war-torn Europe. But Korea was his crucible. North Korean forces stormed south, and Truman responded with U.S. troops under the UN flag. The Korean War ended in stalemate, but Truman's decisiveness redefined America's post-war role. His "the buck stops here" mantra became presidential folklore. Dwight D. Eisenhower led from 1953 to 1961, turning battlefield discipline into presidential strategy. Supreme Allied Commander turned president, Ike's leadership was calm, calculated, and quietly forceful. He ended the Korean War, expanded Social Security, and built the interstate highway system, America's concrete backbone. But his real battlefield was the Cold War. Eisenhower championed massive retaliation, building America's nuclear arsenal as a deterrent. His farewell address warned of the military-industrial complex, a prophetic caution against runaway defense spending. A warrior who knew peace was the ultimate victory. John F. Kennedy took the helm from 1961 to 1963, bringing charisma and crisis management to the nuclear edge. JFK's presidency was a Cold War thriller from day one. The Bay of Pigs invasion was a disaster, but he redeemed himself during the Cuban Missile Crisis, navigating the world back from the brink of nuclear annihilation. His vision, the new frontier, space exploration, civil rights, and a youthful energy that captivated a generation. Ask not what your country can do for you became a mantra of service. But his story ended abruptly on November 22nd, 1963, when an assassin's bullet in Dallas turned promise into tragedy. Lyndon B. Johnson powered through from 1963 to 1969, a political titan with a legacy of both triumph and tragedy. LBJ was a political force of nature. His Great Society programs, Medicare, Medicaid, the war on poverty, reshaped America's social fabric. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 cemented his legacy as a champion of equality. But Vietnam was his downfall. Each escalation dragged America deeper into a quagmire. The Tet Offensive shattered public trust. With the nation divided, LBJ shocked the world by refusing to seek re-election. His presidency remains one of towering achievements and haunting failures. Richard Nixon returned to power from 1969 to 1974, mastering foreign diplomacy but undone by domestic scandal. The ultimate comeback kid. Nixon lost to JFK in 1960, but returned with a vengeance in 1968. He ended the draft, initiated détente with the Soviet Union, and in a geopolitical masterstroke, opened diplomatic relations with China. But Vietnam still loomed. His policy of Vietnamization aimed to withdraw American troops, yet the war's scars lingered. Watergate was his undoing. A break-in, a cover-up, and relentless investigations forced the first-ever presidential resignation. Nixon's fall wasn't just personal. It shattered American trust in government. Gerald Ford stepped in from 1974 to 1977, a steady hand during a national identity crisis. Ford stepped into chaos after Nixon's resignation, his first act, pardoning Nixon, a move that cost him politically, but he believed spared the nation more pain. Ford was honest, unassuming, and steady, but the shadows of Watergate and a struggling economy weighed heavily. His presidency was a brief bridge, restoring stability but lacking the charisma for re-election. He famously stumbled on camera, but history would later credit him for steadying a shaken republic. Jimmy Carter took the reins from 1977 to 1981, an outsider who promised, "I'll never lie to you." Carter's presidency was defined by moral leadership but plagued by relentless crises. The energy crisis had Americans waiting in gas lines. Inflation soared. But Carter's crowning foreign policy achievement, the Camp David Accords, a historic peace agreement between Egypt and Israel, yet the Iran hostage crisis, where 52 Americans were held for 444 days, crushed public confidence. His response, a failed rescue mission, symbolized a presidency overwhelmed by events beyond his control. Post-presidency, Carter became a humanitarian icon, winning the Nobel Peace Prize. But as president, he was a man ahead of his time, trapped in a turbulent era. Ronald Reagan stepped into the spotlight from 1981 to 1989, turning charisma into political power. The great communicator. Reagan's sunny optimism masked a fierce Cold Warrior. Government isn't the solution, government is the problem. His supply-side Reaganomics promised to revive the economy through tax cuts and deregulation. Critics called it trickle-down, but the economy roared back. On the world stage, Reagan ramped up defense spending, dubbed the USSR the evil empire, and challenged Gorbachev with, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." By the time he left office, the Cold War's end was within sight. Surviving an assassination attempt, Reagan became a symbol of American resilience. His legacy, a conservative revolution and a reshaped political landscape. George H.W. Bush carried the torch from 1989 to 1993, a statesman bred for foreign policy. A World War II hero, former CIA director, and Reagan's loyal VP, Bush Sr., took office as a master of diplomacy. Under his command, the Cold War ended peacefully. But his defining moment, the Gulf War. After Iraq invaded Kuwait, Bush orchestrated a global coalition, launched Operation Desert Storm, and liberated Kuwait in 100 hours of ground combat. Domestically, however, a recession and his infamous "read my lips," no new taxes flip-flop eroded his support. His presidency was a masterclass in diplomacy, but economic woes cost him re-election. Bill Clinton brought his Southern charm to the presidency from 1993 to 2001, the comeback king. Clinton presided over one of the longest economic booms in U.S. history. NAFTA, welfare reform, and a budget surplus defined his domestic legacy. But scandals shadowed his presidency. The Monica Lewinsky affair led to his impeachment for lying under oath. He was acquitted, but the political scars remained. Yet Clinton's approval ratings soared. His presidency became a paradox. Scandal-ridden yet economically successful. His charm, resilience, and political instincts made him a survivor in the truest sense. George W. Bush took command from 2001 to 2009, a presidency forever defined by a single morning. He entered office after a bitterly contested election. But on September 11th, 2001, everything changed. The 9/11 attacks transformed Bush into a wartime president. The War on Terror defined his era, the invasion of Afghanistan to dismantle al-Qaeda, the controversial war in Iraq based on faulty WMD intelligence, and the infamous mission accomplished moment that haunted his legacy. Domestically, his tax cuts, No Child Left Behind Act, and response to Hurricane Katrina drew sharp criticism. By 2008, the financial crisis devastated the economy. His presidency ended amidst plummeting approval ratings, but his decisions reshaped the 21st century geopolitical landscape. Barack Obama took the oath in 2009 and led until 2017, breaking barriers and igniting a movement. The first African-American president. His 2008 campaign wasn't just an election. It was a movement. Yes, we can became a rallying cry for a generation. Inheriting a nation on the brink of economic collapse, Obama passed the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, reforming health care amidst a storm of political warfare. His foreign policy saw a pivot to diplomacy, the Iran nuclear deal, restoring relations with Cuba. But his boldest strike? The operation that took down Osama bin Laden in 2011, a mission that avenged 9/11. Yet his presidency was a tale of battles against gridlock, drone warfare controversies, and a nation increasingly divided. Calm under fire, Obama's legacy is both a symbol of progress and a mirror to America's unresolved tensions. Donald Trump stormed into the presidency from 2017 to 2021, flipping the political playbook upside down. No president exploded onto the political scene like Donald Trump. Businessman, showman, disruptor. He rode a wave of populism promising to drain the swamp and make America great again. His presidency was a daily media spectacle. Tax cuts, deregulation, and 3 Supreme Court appointments reshaped conservative America. But Trump's era was defined by chaos. The Mueller investigation, impeachment over Ukraine, trade wars with China, and the COVID-19 pandemic. His defiance reached a climax on January 6, 2021, with the Capitol insurrection leading to his second impeachment. Loved and loathed, Trump's presidency redefined the political battlefield, turning every tweet into a grenade. Joe Biden took the oath in 2021, stepping into the Oval Office at a moment of national exhaustion. At 78, Biden became the oldest president ever elected. His mission? Pandemic recovery, restoring alliances, and calming a nation fatigued by political warfare. He passed a massive infrastructure bill, led efforts to distribute COVID vaccines, and navigated a chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, ending America's longest war. Biden faced record inflation, a resurging Russia, and deepening domestic divides. His presidency is still unfolding, but his challenge remains clear: to prove that experience and empathy can heal a nation scarred by division. Donald Trump crashed back into the presidency in 2025, defying the odds and setting the world on edge once again. His return wasn't quiet. It was a global event. Trump claimed he alone could end the wars nobody else could, and somehow he did. He brokered a controversial ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, halting years of bloodshed by offering the art of the deal diplomacy, heavy on sanctions relief, light on accountability. In the Middle East, he forced Iran and Israel to the table through economic muscle and back-channel deals, declaring it peace through strength, and tariffs. But Trump's second term wasn't all victory laps. His administration's shady oversight of cryptocurrency markets blurred lines between regulation and personal gain, igniting scandals in both Wall Street and Washington. Then came Palestine. When conflict erupted, Trump's approach was anything but conventional: direct intervention, aggressive arms deals, and a media circus of ceasefire photo ops. Domestically, his tariff war returned with a vengeance, slapping insane levies on China, Europe, and even American allies. Every move sparked chaos. But for Trump, that was the point. His second term? A whirlwind of backroom deals, media battles, and a foreign policy doctrine that could be summed up in one word: unpredictable.